G'day everyone. Today, I've got a story that you're really going to want to hear. So go on, pull up a chair and pour yourself a cuppa. Here on my channel, we believe in the magic of a good yarn. Let's get into this one together. A cold, biting rain hammered the asphalt, smearing the neon lights of Hobart across the wet streets. It had been only 3 months since probationary Constable Chloe Mitchell was assigned to the Central Police Station in Tasmania. Sitting in the passenger seat of the patrol car, the warmth of the heater was making her drowsy, a stark contrast to the tension knotted in her stomach. Behind the wheel was Inspector Jack Callahan. On secondment from the mainland, Callahan was an elite officer in charge of the state's K-9 unit. An icy aura seemed to radiate from him, dominating the small space inside the car. "Oi, Mitchell, stop daydreaming, you're on patrol." His voice was utterly devoid of warmth, sharp and cold like a razor's edge. "Why yes sir, sorry, sir." Chloe straightened her back instantly, forcing her eyes to scan the rain-lashed city streets. Callahan was a man who worshipped pedigree and results above all else. For a rookie like Chloe, fresh out of the academy with zero real-world experience, she was less than nothing to him. His gaze always seemed to pass right through her, as if looking at a label that just said, "Useless rookie." It was then that the car's headlights sliced through the dark, illuminating a small, dark shape huddled on the side of the road. "Stop the car!" Chloe's voice was almost a shout. Callahan clicked his tongue in annoyance but slowly pulled the patrol car over to the shoulder. "What's all the fuss about?" "There's something there." Without grabbing an umbrella, Chloe flung the car door open and dashed out. The freezing rain instantly soaked her uniform. Lying in a muddy puddle was a small Kelpie-cross puppy. It couldn't have been more than a few months old. Its skinny body trembled uncontrollably, each breath a shallow, ragged gasp, a pathetic whimper, almost lost in the engine's hum, tore at Chloe's heart. Its amber eyes were clouded, the light already fading from them. It looked like it had been caught on the edge of a bushfire. Its fur was matted with soot and ash. "Oh, you poor thing, it's okay, you're safe now," Chloe whispered, reaching out a gentle hand to touch the frail body. In that moment, the puppy summoned its last ounce of strength and gave her fingertips a weak lick. The faint warmth of it nearly brought tears to her eyes. "Mitchell, what are you doing? Get back in the car, now!" Callahan's cold voice cut through the air. He hadn't even bothered to get out, just cracking his window to look down on her. "But sir, this puppy, it's going to die. We have to help it." "Help it? We're not a bloody animal rescue. That thing is just a worthless mongrel." The word mongrel struck Chloe's heart like a shard of glass. She looked back at him, her face a mask of disbelief. "There's no such thing as a worthless life. Sir, this dog is alive. If you've got time to worry about one stray mutt, you're not focusing on your patrol. It's a waste of taxpayer money." There was not a shred of compassion in his words. He spoke as if he were dealing with a piece of rubbish that needed to be disposed of. "No," Chloe said, her voice trembling. The word of refusal came out clearer and firmer than she'd expected. "What did you say?" Callahan's eyebrow twitched, his sharp gaze fixing on her. "I said no, I can't just leave him here to die." With a newfound resolve, Chloe gently scooped the little puppy into her arms. She didn't care about the mud and rain staining her uniform. The definite, fragile weight of life in her arms was all that mattered. Right now, she couldn't think of anything more important than protecting it. Callahan slowly opened his car door and stood before her. Tall and imposing, he loomed over her like a giant wall. "Constable Mitchell, do you have any idea what you are doing?" he growled, his voice low and threatening. "This is my duty as a police officer." "Duty? Don't make me laugh," Callahan sneered, his face etched with contempt. He glanced at the puppy in Chloe's arms and then said with disgust, "Listen to me and listen good. That dog, and you for choosing it, are a bloody embarrassment to this force." The shock felt like all the blood in her body was flowing backwards. Humiliation and anger turned her vision red. As Chloe bit her lip, fighting back tears, Callahan continued his verbal assault. "If you decide to keep that mutt, don't expect to have a desk to come back to tomorrow." It was a clear and final ultimatum. Her career, or the tiny life in her arms. Standing in the freezing, relentless rain, Chloe met Callahan's icy stare and held the little puppy in her arms tighter. In her trembling hands, the puppy whimpered once more. A faint, fragile sound. That sound sealed her decision. The late-night vet clinic smelled of antiseptic and was filled with a tense silence. Still in her soaking uniform, Chloe watched with bated breath as the puppy lay limp on a small treatment table. The veteran veterinarian stared grimly at the X-rays and blood test results, before slowly shaking his head. "I'm sorry, but the prognosis is not good. The words felt like a death sentence. Hypothermia, severe malnutrition, and it looks like he was clipped by a car. There's internal damage. To be honest, it'll be a miracle if he makes it through the night. The chances of survival are extremely low. Despair settled over Chloe like a cold fog. Callahan's insults, the cold looks from her colleagues. And now, this fading life in front of her. Had she made a terrible mistake? Was her self-righteousness just causing this poor creature more pain? Guilt gnawed at her heart like a dark parasite. But doctor, isn't there anything? Anything at all we can do? She pleaded, her voice thick with tears. The vet looked at her with pity. We'll do everything we can. But unless a miracle happens. Miracle, that one word ignited a spark in Chloe's heart. Wiping her wet cheeks roughly with her sleeve, she leaned over the puppy on the table. Can you hear me? You can't give up. You absolutely cannot give up. I'm here now. I will protect you. On the spot, she gave the puppy a name, Rusty. A classic, tough Aussie name, for a little fighter she prayed would stand up again and live with hope. The next day, just as expected, Chloe was met with a wall of silence at the station. After receiving a report from Callahan, the superintendent gave her a severe reprimand. Her colleagues kept their distance, whispering things like, "That's the rookie who brought in a stray," and "causing trouble for everyone." They treated her like she was radioactive. The air in the break room was thick with tension, and an invisible barrier seemed to form around her. She bit her lip in frustration, but for now, all she could do was endure it. From that day on, Chloe began a tireless vigil. With the superintendent's reluctant permission, she brought Rusty back to her small apartment. In a corner of her room, she made a small bed out of blankets. Every few hours, she would feed him nutrient paste with a dropper, gently clean his dirty body, and talk to him endlessly. Come on, Rusty, you can do it. Fight. Sometimes she wasn't sure if she was talking to him, or to herself. Days passed, Rusty's condition fluctuated, and Chloe's own physical and mental state was pushed to the limit. She'd get through her patrols in a fog of exhaustion, only to come home to care for Rusty. The relentless cycle was slowly grinding her down. Then one night, it happened. Waking from a short nap, Chloe realized with a jolt of panic that her police ID wallet was missing. She turned pale. She had no memory of where she could have lost it. If its loss was discovered, she would face severe disciplinary action. Already an outcast at the station, she couldn't afford another mistake. Where is it? Where could it be? She searched her apartment frantically, but it was nowhere. As panic set in, Rusty, who had been sleeping almost constantly, staggered to his feet and wobbled over to her. He started sniffing the air, then slowly padded towards her wardrobe. He stopped in front of a stack of cardboard boxes in the corner, pawed at one of them, and let out a short, sharp bark. Half believing, Chloe moved the boxes aside. Wedged in the gap behind them was her familiar black leather ID wallet. It's here, Rusty. How did you? With trembling hands, Chloe picked up the wallet and hugged Rusty tightly. For the first time, Rusty, though still weak, gave a tiny wag of his tail. A clear, certain light had returned to his cloudy amber eyes. Hot tears streamed down Chloe's face. They were tears of relief and gratitude. But more than anything, they were tears of awe for the small miracle happening right in front of her. Rusty hadn't just followed a scent. He had sensed her panic, her distress. He had smelled the change in her emotions and had wanted to help. Feeling the warmth of the small life in her arms, Chloe knew with absolute certainty, this wasn't just any dog. He had something special. Callahan's sneering voice echoed in her mind. An embarrassment to the force. He had called this little life. But what if this special ability, what if it was a power that could save someone? A new, seemingly impossible idea began to dawn in Chloe's mind. It was a single ray of light in the darkness, a flicker of hope that refused to be extinguished. The glimpse of Rusty's incredible talent turned the small spark of hope in Chloe's heart into a burning flame. From that day on, Rusty's recovery was astonishing. He began to put on weight, and his steps grew stronger each day, and his uncanny ability was proven time and again in their daily life. On nights when Chloe came home stressed and down, he would quietly curl up at her feet, nudging her with his nose as if to comfort her. If the neighbors started having a loud argument, he would sense the bad vibes long before anyone else and look up at Chloe with anxious eyes. This was beyond the sharp senses of a normal dog. It was as if Rusty could read the vibrations of human emotion in the air. Maybe he could do it. A bold idea formed in Chloe's mind. The K9 unit. Logically, it was an impossible dream. Police dogs were almost always specific breeds known for their trainability. Like German Shepherds or Labradors, most of them came from elite bloodlines and had undergone specialized training from a young age. A Kelpie-cross, a mongrel found on the side of the road with no papers, would be laughed out of the program. But Chloe's resolve was firm. She believed in Rusty's potential more than anyone. This talent couldn't be wasted. This power was meant to help people. A few days later, Chloe took a deep breath and knocked on the superintendent's door. Hearing her audacious proposal, the superintendent frowned, deep lines forming on his forehead. "Look, Chloe, I understand your sentiment, but it's just not realistic. There are strict standards for selecting K9s. Sir, please, just give him a chance. Let me show you what he can do. He has a special ability that no other dog has." The superintendent was speechless at Chloe's desperate plea. Just then, the door was thrown open and Callahan entered, bringing his icy presence with him. "Excuse me for interrupting, Superintendent. I couldn't help but overhear something amusing." Callahan shot Chloe a condescending look and smirked. "You want to make that mongrel a police dog? Constable, are you still spouting that nonsense?" "It's not nonsense. Rusty is talented," Chloe retorted, not backing down. Callahan sighed theatrically, as if utterly exasperated. "A mutt with no pedigree? Let me educate you. A police dog is the culmination of generations of controlled breeding and rigorous training. It's a product of science. There is no room for baseless sentiment or wishful thinking." His words were cold, hard logic, and they pierced Chloe's chest. She bit her lip, searching for a rebuttal, but nothing came. Seeing her struggle, Callahan pressed his advantage. "Besides, you broke regulations to rescue that dog in the first place. By rights, that alone is grounds for dismissal. We let it slide out of goodwill. Don't cause any more trouble for the station." "Is not trouble," Chloe said, her voice barely a whisper, but clear. "I know Rusty can help people. I'll prove it. Please, just let him participate in the K9 training program." The moment she said it, Chloe saw a cruel glint in Callahan's eyes. He paused for a moment. Then a twisted smile spread across his face, as if he'd just thought of a fun new spectacle. "Oh, you're that confident? Interesting." He turned to the superintendent. "Sir, I think we should allow it. If she's so certain, let's give her a chance. Under the same conditions as the other candidates, of course." Both Chloe and the superintendent stared at him, stunned. There was no way Callahan would agree to this so easily. As they tried to figure out his true motive, Callahan turned back to Chloe and delivered his verdict. "All right, Constable Mitchell, you want to prove it? Show us. But if he can't keep up, if you make a fool of yourself in front of the other officers, you're out, on the spot, both you, and that mutt of yours." This wasn't a chance. It was a death sentence. It was a public execution designed to crush Chloe and Rusty in front of everyone. To break him beyond repair. The predatory gleam in Callahan's eyes told her everything. Chloe swallowed hard. There was no turning back now. This challenge wasn't just about Rusty's future, it was a gamble with her entire career as a police officer on the line. The atmosphere at the state K9 training facility was as tense as a drawn bowstring. On the vast training ground, the dogs of Callahan's elite unit were lined up. Most were muscular, imposing German shepherds. Their pedigree, physique, and training record screamed elite. Among them, Chloe, with the smaller, scruffier Kelpie-cross Rusty, looked completely out of place. The other handlers didn't bother to hide their looks of curiosity and contempt, openly snickering. "What's that? Did she mistake this for a puppy preschool?" Inspector Callahan has a cruel sense of humor. This is obviously just to make an example of her. The stinging whispers reached Chloe's ears. She clenched her jaw and straightened her spine. "It's okay, Rusty is amazing," she told herself, trying to fight off the crushing pressure. As the training began, Callahan's malice quickly became apparent. "We'll start with obedience drills. Mitchell, you're up first." He deliberately singled her out in front of everyone. Chloe took a deep breath and turned to Rusty. "Rusty, sit." At home, he did it perfectly every time. But here, in this unfamiliar environment, under the glare of dozens of hostile eyes, Rusty just looked up at her, confused, and remained standing. "What's the matter, Mitchell? Can't even manage a simple sit?" Callahan's voice boomed across the field, and the handler's snickers grew louder. The blood drained from Chloe's face. The more she panicked, the more her tension traveled down the leash to Rusty, creating a vicious cycle. Next, obstacle course. Callahan dismissed them with a look one might give to a piece of dirt and moved on. High hurdles, narrow tunnels, an unstable balance beam. The elite dogs, on their handlers' commands, cleared each obstacle with mechanical precision and speed. "Mitchell, go." Chloe encouraged Rusty and led him towards a hurdle. But for a Kelpie, a breed not built for jumping high obstacles, it was a daunting wall. He tried several times, but just bumped into the bar and tumbled backwards. Each time, a wave of laughter erupted from the crowd. This is hopeless. A mongrel can't do this. Chloe's face twisted in humiliation, but she kept encouraging Rusty. It's okay, Rusty, you can do it, one more time. But Callahan's cruelty wasn't finished. He must have known that Kelpies have incredibly sensitive hearing. He suddenly produced a starter pistol, aimed it at the sky, and fired. Bang! The sharp crack echoed across the training ground. In an instant, Rusty let out a terrified yelp and went into a full-blown panic. His tail tucked between his legs. He froze on the spot, trembling violently, the terror of his near-death experience in the bushfire. The loud, cracking sounds came rushing back as a traumatic memory. What's this? A police dog scared of a single gunshot? Callahan said, triumphant. His goal wasn't training, it was to publicly shatter the confidence of Chloe and Rusty. Chloe rushed to the trembling dog and held him tight. I'm sorry, Rusty, I'm so sorry, that was scary, wasn't it? She could feel his heart hammering against his ribs at an alarming rate. She could see the light of confidence in his eyes rapidly disappearing. This can't go on, she thought. This is exactly what Callahan wants. Rusty's spirit will be completely broken. After the session ended, as the other handlers left, chattering and laughing, Chloe and Rusty remained huddled in a corner of the training ground like defeated soldiers. Callahan slowly approached them. So, Mitchell, this is reality. The talent you believed in amounts to this. Why don't you just give up on this pointless dream? Spitting out the cruel words, Callahan turned his back and walked away. That night, back in her apartment, Chloe massaged Rusty's exhausted body. Deep in thought, Callahan's methods were despicable, but fighting on his terms was a losing battle. Rusty's strengths weren't physical, they were his incredible sense of smell and his empathy. That's it, I have to play a different game. Chloe decided on a risky gamble. She would, in a way, ignore the training regimen set by Callahan. She would do the bare minimum on the obedience and obstacle drills. But she would pour every other moment into a unique training program of her own design, honing Rusty's incredible sense of smell. Not for objects, but for the scent of human emotion. It was an unprecedented approach that defied all conventions of canine training. If it failed, she would be a laughingstock. But Chloe had no other choice. Rusty, she whispered, it's time for us to fight our own battle. In our own way. In response, the exhausted dog lifted his head. In the depths of his eyes, she saw a small but definite spark of light return. She didn't miss it. This was the start of their counterattack. A quiet rebellion born from the brink of despair. A month passed since Chloe and Rusty began their lonely fight. During the official daytime training, they endured Callahan's relentless harassment and the cold stares of the other handlers. Just scraping by on the required tasks. But at night, in deserted parks and along the riverbank, Chloe worked tirelessly to develop Rusty's special talent. She enlisted her friends to help. She had them hide in various states of emotion, fear, sadness, joy, calmness, and had Rusty track their emotional scent. Soon, Rusty began to show an incredible accuracy, especially in finding people emitting negative emotions like fear and sadness, ignoring all other distracting smells. A solid sense of confidence was growing in Chloe's heart. If she could just prove this ability, surely everyone would have to acknowledge it. Then, the day of destiny arrived. It was the first official evaluation for K-9 candidates. Senior officers from headquarters and other police officials were there as judges. It was the most important day, where the candidates would showcase the results of their training. Chloe's heart had been pounding since morning. She had staked everything on this day. The evaluation began in a solemn atmosphere. The elite dogs led by Callahan delivered one flawless performance after another, drawing impressed murmurs from the judges. Finally, it was Chloe and Rusty's turn. The eyes of everyone in the hall focused on them like 1,000 sharp needles. Begin, Callahan's order echoed. The first obedience drill went smoothly. Thanks to their consistent effort, Rusty remained calm and completed the tasks. The subsequent obstacle course, while not perfect, was managed without major incident. A small murmur went through the crowd. That mongrel's not half bad. A sliver of acceptance was in the air. It was then that Callahan took the microphone and addressed the judges. We will now begin the final test. With the rise of violent crime, police dogs are required to have an unshakable mental fortitude in any situation. Therefore, we will now test their ability to respond to a sudden, unexpected event, simulating a real-life scenario. The moment Chloe heard those words, a cold sweat ran down her spine. She had a terrible feeling about this. A wicked smile played on Callahan's lips as he signaled an assistant. The next moment, a series of deafening, ear-splitting gunshot sound effects blasted from the large speakers set up in the hall. Bang, bang, bang. It was the sound that triggered Rusty's deepest trauma. At the sudden explosive noise, Rusty's body went rigid, his amber eyes widened in terror, and his whole body began to shake violently. "Rusty, stay with me!" Chloe's desperate cry didn't seem to reach him. Plunged into a full-blown panic, Rusty completely ignored Chloe's commands. He began running wildly around the hall, whining in terror, frantically searching for an escape. Oh, what a shame! Sighs of disappointment came from the judges' seats. The hall was in chaos. Chloe's world slowly turned to monochrome. "It's not Rusty's fault. It was me. I pushed him into this." She had walked right into Callahan's vicious trap. Callahan looked down on the pathetic scene with satisfaction, slowly bringing the microphone to his lips. His voice echoed coldly through the now silent hall. "Behold, this is the limit of a dog with no pedigree." His tone was filled with pity and contempt. He glanced from the terrified dog cowering in the corner to Chloe, who was about to collapse, and delivered the final blow. "Constable Mitchell, you and your dog have been a complete and utter failure. As of this moment, you are both dismissed from the K9 program." Dismissed. The word echoed in Chloe's head like a death sentence. Her knees gave way, and she crumbled to the floor, her vision blurred with tears. In the distance, she could hear Rusty's sad, whimpering cries, as if he was blaming himself. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Rusty," was all Chloe could manage to say. Her dream had been brutally shattered. Callahan's sneer, the judge's cold stares, the mockery of her colleagues, they all became sharp teeth, tearing her heart to pieces. There was nothing left here, only complete despair and the wreckage of a broken dream. Amid the merciless glares, all Chloe could do was cry in silence. The disastrous failure at the evaluation quickly became common knowledge at the station. Chloe and Rusty were no longer just nuisances, they were now treated as the station's shame. Walking down the hallway meant enduring open mockery and scornful looks. No one even tried to speak to her. Callahan's power, and the useless mongrel narrative he had created, dominated the station. Chloe's spirit was completely broken. Even sitting at her own desk, Callahan's cold voice saying, "Dismissed," replayed in her mind like tinnitus. The image of Rusty's terrified eyes was seared into her memory. "I pushed him too far. It's my fault his heart is so deeply wounded." The guilt was a heavy weight. Maybe I should just quit. How many times had she thought that? Huddled in her apartment, the long-held dream of being a police officer. But if she continued to pursue it, she might only cause Rusty more pain. And more than that, she no longer had the strength to get back up. The resignation form sat on her desk, and the hours just ticked by. Just then, Rusty quietly came and curled up at her feet. He had been listless since the evaluation, not even wanting to go for his favorite walks. But whenever Chloe cried, he would always come to her side, pressing his warm body against hers, as if to say, "You're not alone." Suddenly, her smartphone rang, shattering the silence. The screen showed the name of her younger sister, Sophie, who lived on the mainland. Chloe didn't have the energy to answer, but the persistent ringing finally made her give in and press the call button. "Hello? Chloe, you don't sound good. Are you okay? I saw the news about the police dog thing." Hearing Sophie's concerned voice, the tears Chloe had been holding back started to flow again. "It's over, Soph. I was wrong about everything. All I did was make Rusty miserable." Sophie listened quietly as Chloe told her everything, her words choked with sobs. When Chloe had finished, Sophie spoke in a calm but strong voice. "Are you sure about that? Did you make him miserable? Who was it that saved him when he was dying on the side of the road? Who gave him a reason to live again when he was a mess?" "That was you, Chloe." Her words made Chloe pause. "Who cares what everyone else thinks? That Callahan guy, the others, they don't know anything about Rusty. The person who understands him best in the whole world is you. So you have to be the one to believe in him." After the call, Sophie's words resonated deeply in Chloe's heart. That's right, what have I lost sight of? Somewhere along the way, she had become obsessed with getting approval from Callahan and the others. And she had forgotten to listen to Rusty's own heart. Chloe gently stroked the head of Rusty, who was sleeping at her feet. He looked so peaceful. "I'm sorry, Rusty, I was wrong. I'm not going to try to get anyone's approval anymore. I will be the one to prove your worth. Let's start over, just the two of us." That night, Chloe sat at her desk and reviewed all her training records. She forced herself to forget Callahan's biased training menu, the failed evaluation, all of it. She focused purely on Rusty's abilities. His sense of smell was extraordinary. He wasn't just tracking sense of objects. He was tracking emotions, the subtle chemical changes humans release under stress and fear. Traditional K9 training focused on tracking material sense. like a criminal's clothing or specific drugs. But Rusty's ability was on a different level. Chloe arrived at a hypothesis. Rusty's past trauma, his near-death experience in the bushfire, had paradoxically heightened his sensitivity to the fear and life-threatening danger of others. If that was the case, there was only one thing to do: completely ignore the evaluation criteria set by Callahan and his cronies. She would create a completely new training method that maximized Rusty's unique personality. It would be a lonely challenge, understood by no one, but the old light had returned to Chloe's eyes. She suddenly remembered something. Rusty would sometimes show an obsessive interest in specific articles in old newspapers and magazines. Sniffing them intensely, she'd never paid it much mind. But those articles had something in common. They were all stories about people who had experienced extreme fear and despair. Like mountain rescue survivors or kidnapping victims. Is he smelling the memory of fear left behind in the ink on the page? No, that's crazy. But if it were true, a shiver ran down Chloe's spine. It was a feeling of awe, as if she had just cracked open a door to the bottomless potential of the creature called Rusty. A potential no one else in the world knew existed. Dismissed from the K9 program, Chloe and Rusty completely vanished from the main stage. Within the station, it was as if they no longer existed. Callahan gloated about the superiority of his elite, purebred dogs, saying Chloe's failure was a good lesson for everyone. But Chloe's heart was no longer swayed by such outside noise. The center of her world was now solely occupied by Rusty. To test the hypothesis she'd formed, Chloe resumed their secret training. The goal was to prove, and then control, his ability to distinguish the scent of fear. She got creative. She asked a hunter friend for a piece of cloth that had been near an animal in its final moments, saturated with the unique scent of distress. She volunteered at a disaster drill and got them to give her clothes worn by role-players who were in a state of extreme tension. These became Rusty's textbooks. At first, she just let him smell the cloths. Rusty showed a much stronger reaction to these items soaked in fear and mortal danger than to any other scent. He would sniff, whine, and sometimes look up at Chloe's face with concern. Her hypothesis was hardening into fact. For the next stage, Chloe started hiding these cloths in various places in a large park and a forest. And had Rusty find them. She didn't command him with a sharp, "find it," like in traditional training. Instead, she stayed by his side, her voice calm and encouraging. "You can smell it, can't you, Rusty? The scent of someone who's scared and waiting for help. It's okay, we're going to help them." He probably didn't understand the words, but her calm voice and her own strong desire to help someone were definitely getting through to him. As if guided by that emotion, Rusty began to track the scent with incredible focus. He ignored distracting smells like food or other animals, things that would sidetrack any other dog, and headed straight for the hidden source of fear. This was not the same timid, frightened dog from before. There was no hesitation in his steps. His amber eyes shone with a quiet, powerful light, as if he now understood his mission. As they continued their training, an absolute bond of trust, beyond words, formed between them. Chloe learned to communicate her intentions through the subtle tension of the leash and the rhythm of her own breathing. Rusty, in turn, learned to signal the situation to Chloe through the angle of his ears, the wag of his tail, and the soft rumbles in his throat. It was as if they were a single organism, sharing thoughts and senses. One day during training, Chloe pretended to be in a panic and hid in the woods. She held her breath and consciously quickened her heartbeat. Within minutes, she heard the rustle of leaves, and Rusty appeared, a worried look on his face. He licked her face all over and nuzzled his head against her, as if to say, "Are you okay?" Chloe hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Rusty, you're the best partner a girl could ask for." There was a bond here that could never be explained by Callahan's precious pedigrees or scientific training data. It was a connection of souls, shared only by those who had understood each other's pain, stood by each other, and overcome it together. As these days continued, one evening, the call came. An urgent radio dispatch crackled through the station. An 80-year-old man with dementia, living on the outskirts of town, had been missing since the afternoon. A cold front was moving in, and every second counted. Naturally, Callahan's K9 unit was deployed for the search. At her desk, Chloe listened to the tense radio chatter, biting her lip. Point B, no scent. Same at point C, rain might have washed away the tracks. The search was going badly. With every passing moment, the old man's life was in greater danger. Chloe's heart began to pound like an alarm. She couldn't just sit here. Rusty could find him. No, I know he can find him. Rusty could definitely pick up the scent of the fear and anxiety the old man must be feeling. But they had been dismissed from the K9 program. Heading to the scene on her own would be a major violation of regulations. If she were caught, this time she would surely be fired. Chloe was torn. Regulations, or a human life? Callahan's irritated voice came over the radio. We're calling off the search for tonight. We'll resume at dawn. Those words cut through Chloe's hesitation. Dawn might be too late. She quietly stood up from her desk. In the locker room, she changed out of her uniform into civilian clothes. She slipped out a back door, unseen by anyone, and ran through the night to her apartment. To her partner, it was an unauthorized, rogue mission, but her mind was made up. The power they had built together. It was time to use it for someone who truly needed help. Even if it cost her everything. The night was deeper and darker than she'd expected. With a personal torch in one hand, Chloe led Rusty deep into the woods behind the area where the missing man was last seen. The official search party had already left, and the area was wrapped in an eerie silence. The sound of the wind rustling the trees and the distant call of a night bird seemed amplified in the darkness. Please, Rusty. Chloe held out an old handkerchief she had secretly borrowed from the man's family. One he always used. She brought it to Rusty's nose. Remember this scent. He must be cold and scared, waiting for help. Rusty sniffed the handkerchief intently, then gave a single, short bark, as if he understood. It was the signal for the start of a real mission, different from their training. He immediately put his nose to the ground and started tracking, but the direction he took was completely different from what Chloe had expected. It wasn't the well-trodden paths or open areas the official search party had focused on. Without hesitation, Rusty plunged into a dense, pathless thicket. This way, Rusty. Chloe pushed aside overgrown branches, her feet slipping on the muddy ground. As she scrambled to keep up with him, there was no hesitation in Rusty's gait. He wasn't following a physical track left on the ground, he was following the faint scent of fear lingering in the air. After about 30 minutes, sweat was beading on Chloe's forehead, and she was out of breath. Are we really going the right way? For a moment, doubt crept into her mind. Just then, Rusty stopped dead in his tracks. He stared into the darkness ahead and began to let out a low growl. His ears were pricked, the fur on his back standing on end. What is it, boy? Chloe shone her torch ahead. The beam revealed a small creek bed, with a steep, cliff-like drop. The light illuminated an unnatural-looking pile of fallen leaves at the bottom. Rusty now barked loudly towards the bottom of the cliff. A clear, strong bark meant to alert someone. Her heart leaping into her throat, Chloe carefully made her way down the cliff. She slipped on the slick slope, getting covered in mud, but finally reached the pile of leaves. The moment her torchlight fell upon it, she gasped. Half buried in the leaves, an old man was lying unconscious. He must have slipped and fallen. He was barely conscious, and his body was ice cold. It was clear he was suffering from severe hypothermia. Sir, can you hear me? Chloe took off her own jacket and wrapped it around the man, desperately trying to warm him while calling out to him. With trembling hands, she took out her phone, called 000, and then made an anonymous call to the station's emergency line. Man found collapsed in the woods by the creek. Send help. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens grew closer. Paramedics and police officers who had turned back arrived at the scene. Among them was Inspector Callahan, his face a mask of disbelief as he stared at Chloe. The old man was quickly put on a stretcher and rushed to the hospital. The early discovery had saved his life. The scene was in chaos. How did Chloe, a rookie with no official training, and that useless dog, find the man that nobody else could? Everyone was asking the same question. Chloe prepared herself to be severely disciplined for her rogue actions. But before that could happen, one of the veteran detectives at the scene muttered, just loud enough for Callahan to hear. Well, Inspector, the rookie and her mongrel found the person your elite unit missed. What do you make of that? The comment wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but it was enough to make Callahan's face tighten. He shot Chloe and Rusty a bitter glare, then turned and left without a word. The next day, the rescue was officially credited to the K-9 unit that had resumed the search. Chloe's unauthorized actions were dealt with by a verbal-only, off-the-record warning from the superintendent. But the atmosphere in the station had undeniably started to change. Hey, did you hear? Apparently, it was Constable Mitchell's dog that actually found the old bloke yesterday. Yeah, I heard. Inspector Callahan was furious. His precious reputation took a hit. The rumors spread quietly but surely. Callahan summoned Chloe to his office. The air in his room felt like a freezer. Mitchell, don't you ever pull a stunt like that again. He seethed, his voice low with suppressed rage. Last night was a fluke. A lucky break. Don't get any ideas and overstep your bounds again. Or next time, There will be consequences. It was a threat, but Chloe thought she could see a tiny flicker of fear behind his words. He was afraid that the absolute values he believed in, pedigree, results, were being shaken to their core by an unknown mongrel. Chloe said nothing, she just gave a slight nod, and left the room. Words were no longer necessary. The result spoke for itself. There was no fear or doubt in her heart anymore, only a quiet fire, ready for the next challenge. That weekend, Tasmania was hit by record-breaking rainfall. The deluge, as if a hole had opened in the sky, caused rivers to swell and triggered landslide warnings. The situation was tense. And in the middle of the storm, the worst happened. A primary school boy went missing in the mountains. Chloe was at home, off duty, when the emergency news bulletin flashed across her TV. A local kids' footy team was on a camping trip, and a 7-year-old boy named Leo had wandered off into the forest alone. An emergency recall was issued from the station, and Chloe rushed to the scene. The command post set up on site was in chaos. A whirlwind of rain, wind, and shouting. Callahan was there, his face grim, barking orders at the search teams. Team 1, search the West Ridge, K9 unit, with me, the river's flooding, don't expect any scent trails. Visual search only. Callahan's elite K9 unit was deployed. But in this weather, their skills were useless. The torrential rain had washed away every single scent from the ground. The physical evidence they relied on was completely gone. Time was ticking by. The boy's body temperature would be dropping rapidly in the cold. In the command post tent, Leo's parents were huddled together, their faces pale with shock. The mother's quiet sobs tightened Chloe's chest. Please, Leo, please be safe. When the search had completely stalled, the superintendent, who had been silently watching the situation unfold, made a decision. He walked over to Chloe, his face etched with deep worry. Constable Mitchell. Yes, sir. Your dog, Rusty, do you think he can do anything in this situation? It was phrased as a question, but it sounded more like a plea. Chloe looked the superintendent straight in the eye. Rusty doesn't track scents on the ground. Sir, he senses the fear that the boy must be feeling. The rain doesn't matter. Hearing her words, the superintendent's jaw clenched. He was clearly risking his entire career. He picked up the radio, and in a trembling but clear voice, he gave the order to Callahan. Callahan, do you copy? I am adding Constable Mitchell and K9 Rusty to the search. Your unit is to follow her lead. There was a moment of silence from the other end of the radio. Then, Callahan's voice, filled with rage, crackled back. Sir, you can't be serious. Adding that mongrel to an official search is unprecedented. It will compromise the entire operation. This is an order. Jack, Leo's life is the top priority. It was a desperate roar from the superintendent. Chloe gripped Rusty's harness. Beside her, Rusty stood quietly, looking up at her with a powerful gaze, as if he understood it was his time. When they met up with Callahan's unit, he glared at Chloe with eyes full of hatred. Fine, but if you find nothing, you know what will happen. Ignoring his obstructive words, Chloe took the small Tasmanian devil plush toy that Leo had been holding just before he disappeared from his mother. Rusty inhaled its scent, deeply. Please, Rusty, find Leo. In that instant, a switch flipped in Rusty. He took off in a straight line, running towards a steep embankment that everyone else had excluded from the search area. Wait, that area is too dangerous, Callahan yelled, but Chloe trusted Rusty and followed him. A raging, swollen river roared right beside them. The footing was treacherous, one wrong step could send them tumbling down. It was a perilous route. Then, Rusty stopped dead in front of a rocky outcrop halfway up the embankment. He pointed his nose to the sky and let out a long, powerful howl. It was a cry of hope, a soul-stirring announcement. Chloe scrambled over, huddled behind the rocks, shivering from cold and fear, was the little boy, clutching his footy. Leo, Chloe wrapped him in a tight embrace. The rescue team arrived, and Leo was safely returned to his parents. It was in that moment of relief that Rusty suddenly turned towards Callahan and started barking aggressively. He then ran to a spot near where Callahan had been standing, shoved his nose into a muddy patch of ground, and came back carrying something. It was another, identical Tasmanian devil plush toy, covered in mud, the real one Leo had been holding when he went missing. The one Chloe had gotten from his mother was a spare from her bag. Why was it here? This was the exact spot that Callahan had first declared clear and ordered his teams to ignore. Everyone on the scene froze. Could it be? Had Callahan intentionally found the first clue, buried it, and deliberately steered the search in the wrong direction? All to ensure his elite dogs would get the credit. And to make absolutely certain that Chloe and Rusty never got their chance? The color drained from Callahan's face. His perfect, elite mask was cracking, and Chloe could almost hear the sound of it shattering. In the pouring rain, a terrible suspicion began to take hold, a scandal that would shake the entire police force to its core. The stormy night gave way to a new storm brewing inside the Hobart Central Police Station. The story of Leo's rescue became an overnight media sensation. Chloe and Rusty were hailed as a miracle duo. Heroes. TV and newspapers ran the dramatic story of how a mongrel with no pedigree had outsmarted an elite K-9 unit to save the boy. The station was flooded with calls of praise and gratitude. Meanwhile, a heavy atmosphere hung over the station. The suspicion surrounding Callahan, while lacking hard evidence, had escalated to an internal investigation. He denied everything, but his authority was shattered, and he had lost the trust of his subordinates. He was no longer the ice-cold elite inspector, but just a pathetic man under a cloud of suspicion. Chloe felt overwhelmed by the sudden fame. Walking down the hall, colleagues who had mocked her just days before now greeted her with awkward smiles. The change made her feel incredibly uncomfortable. Rusty, as if sensing her feelings, stayed quietly by her side whenever they were at the station. In the midst of this frenzy, a figure emerged to pour cold water on their success. Professor Alastair Finch, a renowned authority on animal behavior from the University of Melbourne. He appeared on a national news program and declared condescendingly, "This case is indeed a rare and heartwarming anecdote. However, I must say it lacks any scientific basis. The success of a non-pedigree dog is an anomaly, a mere coincidence with no replicability. We should not allow emotional stories to undermine the established standards for selecting police dogs. The public should not be fooled by this fairy tale." His words, delivered with the hammer of authority, swayed public opinion. The achievement of Chloe and Rusty was relabeled as a fluke, a lucky break, and a cloud of skepticism began to form again. Compounded by the scandal of Callahan's failure, police headquarters decided to take action. They are ordering an official re-verification of the abilities of you and Rusty. When Chloe heard the decision from the superintendent, she couldn't believe her ears. A re-verification, sir? But Rusty saved Leo. I know, this is tearing me apart, the superintendent said, his face etched with pain. But with public criticism from an authority like Professor Finch, and the Callahan issue, headquarters has to protect the integrity of the force. I'm sorry, but this is an order. You will have to prove Rusty's abilities once more in an official setting. It was a completely unreasonable demand. After risking their lives to save a child, now they had to prove their very existence was valid in front of a sea of doubters. A few days later, the details of the public test were announced, and Chloe was horrified. The test was being overseen by none other than Professor Finch, and the challenge itself was clearly designed with malicious intent to humiliate Rusty. The stage was the state's massive disaster response training facility, a mountain of rubble, multiple false scent dispensers, and devices that would emit loud, irregular noises, the very thing that triggered Rusty's trauma. This was not a test of ability. It was a wicked setup, an impossible trial designed to be failed. It was a public execution staged by Professor Finch to protect his own authority. "This is insane," Chloe whispered, clutching the document. It was a trap. The nightmare of the first evaluation was about to be repeated, but in a much more vicious form. She couldn't expose Rusty to that kind of terror again. She had to refuse. But if she backed out now, it would be an admission that it was all just a fluke. That the mongrel was just that, proving Professor Finch right. That night, Chloe lay awake, stroking Rusty's body. "What do I do, Rusty? I might put you through that awful fear again." As if to wipe away her anxiety, Rusty gently licked her hand and stared back at her with his amber eyes. His gaze was steady. "It's okay," he seemed to say, "as long as you're with me. I'm not afraid of anything." A single tear rolled down Chloe's cheek. "That's right. I'm not alone. We're not alone. Together, we can overcome anything." She hugged Rusty tightly. "Okay, Rusty, I get it. Whatever traps they've set, we'll face them. This time, we'll show the whole world just how strong our bond is." Chloe's mind was made up. This wasn't just a test. This was a declaration of war from one nameless girl and her dog against a world full of authority and prejudice. On the day of the public test, the disaster response training facility was buzzing with a strange energy. A line of TV cameras, reporters taking grim notes, and a large crowd of police officials watching with bated breath. Among them, sitting as the official supervisor, was Professor Finch, arms crossed, a look of smug confidence on his face. Elite police dogs from all over the country had been brought in for the event. They were the control group, a baseline against which Rusty's ability would be, objectively, measured. Professor Finch's goal was clear: to contrast the brilliant performance of the elite dogs with Rusty's miserable failure, proving his own theories correct to the world. Chloe stood at the starting line, her breath catching in her throat. Before her lay a nightmarish landscape of scattered rubble and twisted steel, like a real disaster zone. First contestant, begin. The first to go was a pedigree German Shepherd, last year's national champion. He navigated the rubble with agile, confident movements, but as he reached the middle of the course, something strange happened. Several different scents began to spray from hidden nozzles. The smell of burnt rubber, decay, and several other chemical scents. Nothing like what a disaster victim should smell like. The elite dog became confused by the sensory overload, sniffing in circles. Disqualified, a merciless buzzer sounded. One after another, the elite dogs from around the country tried and failed. They were bewildered by the clever scent traps and disoriented by the sudden loud bangs set by Professor Finch. None of them could find the target. A murmur of confusion spread through the crowd at the insane difficulty of the test. Finally, it was Chloe and Rusty's turn. Next, Constable Chloe Mitchell and K9 Rusty. As the announcement echoed, all eyes in the facility turned to them. Chloe took a huge, deep breath. Beside her, Rusty's body was trembling slightly. It was no surprise. The strange atmosphere, the environment designed to trigger his past trauma. It was impossible to stay calm. "It's okay, boy, just look at me," Chloe whispered, kneeling down to look him in the eyes. "This is just a game, just like our usual walks." Her words seemed to calm him a little. "Begin." At the start signal, Chloe started running, and Rusty followed, but his steps were heavy. As they reached the pile of rubble, a deafening, scraping metal sound rang out without warning. Clang! Rusty's body froze solid. The nightmare of the evaluation came flooding back. His amber eyes flickered with terror, and his breathing became ragged. "It's okay, this way," Chloe called out desperately, but Rusty was rooted to the spot. His body was rigid, his tail tucked tightly between his legs. He was having a full-blown traumatic flashback. "What's the matter? Get a move on or you'll run out of time." Professor Finch's mocking voice came over the loudspeaker. This was exactly what he had planned. The mongrel, crumbling under pressure and fear. The flashes of the reporters' cameras went off all at once, their merciless light capturing the image of the frozen dog and the helpless rookie. "I knew it. This is what you wanted to see, wasn't it, Professor?" Voices of pity and disappointment mingled in the air. Chloe's mind went blank. What could she do? This was a repeat of that horrible day. Rusty's spirit might actually break for good this time. The clock ticked on relentlessly. The sound of the second hand on the timer seemed deafeningly loud. "Stop it. I can't watch this anymore." A desperate shout came from the supervisor's area. It was the superintendent. "Stop the test. This is nothing but animal cruelty." His voice sent another wave of shock through the venue. Professor Finch shot him an annoyed glare. The situation was hopeless. Everyone thought it was over. But Chloe hadn't given up. She slowly walked over to Rusty's side. The results of the test didn't matter anymore. All that mattered now was protecting the heart of her precious, trembling partner. The superintendent's desperate cries and Professor Finch's sneers no longer reached Chloe's ears. In her world, there was only the sight of Rusty, trembling in fear. The reporter's intrusive camera flashes illuminated them relentlessly, making her feel like a clown being publicly shamed on a stage. "Rusty," she said softly, kneeling on the ground, completely abandoning the test with the clock ticking down. She wrapped her arms around Rusty's rigid body, gently but firmly. "It's okay now, you don't have to try anymore." Her voice was shaking, not from frustration, but from a sense of her own powerlessness and the guilt of putting Rusty through this again. "I'm sorry, I pushed you into this again. I'm so sorry." She kept whispering apologies into his ear. Hot tears fell from her cheeks, dampening his fur. Winning or losing didn't matter anymore. She didn't care what Professor Finch said or what the world thought. The only thing that mattered was preventing her irreplaceable partner's heart from being broken any further. She had chosen to protect Rusty's heart over the result. Seeing this, the atmosphere in the venue shifted. The spectators, who had been whispering about flukes and mockery, were now silent, watching the two of them with bated breath. What they were seeing was not the relationship between a handler and a dog, but a profound and desperate display of love. "My God," someone whispered, "that's real." Meanwhile, in the control room, Professor Finch watched with unconcealed irritation and clicked his tongue. HMPH, trying to win sympathy votes? Pathetic. See? In the end, just a weak-willed mutt that can't handle pressure. His muttered words echoed emptily. Chloe, oblivious to the world around her, just continued to hold Rusty. Her own calm heartbeat and warmth slowly transferred to him. Rusty's panicked breathing began to even out. The tension in his stiff body gradually eased. He gave a small whine, a sound of relief in the safety of Chloe's arms. Chloe gently pulled back and looked into his eyes. The fear was still there, but the panic was gone. His gaze was now clearly focused on her. "It's okay," Chloe whispered with a small smile. In response, Rusty licked her cheek, as if to wipe away her tears. It was in that moment that Rusty, now calm, suddenly lifted his head. His gaze wasn't on the rubble or the finish line. It was aimed in a completely different direction. He was staring intently at the area where the judges and officials were gathered. He began to let out a low, deep growl. His eyes were fixed on one person, Professor Finch. Chloe was stunned. Rusty rarely showed such clear care and hostility towards a person. He hadn't even reacted this way towards Callahan. "What is it, boy? What's over there?" Ignoring Chloe, Rusty kept his eyes locked on Professor Finch. His body was tensing up again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was with the sharp focus of a hunting dog that has found its prey. Filled with a strong determination to expose something. What had he noticed? Why was he reacting so strongly to Professor Finch? Professor Finch, noticing Rusty's stare, frowned in annoyance. "What's with that dog? Is it planning to attack me?" He casually nudged the leather briefcase at his feet a little further behind him. Rusty did not miss that tiny movement. His nostrils flared, twitching intensely. The next second, as if struck by lightning, Rusty barked loudly and tried to lunge towards Professor Finch. Chloe yanked hard on the leash. "Rusty, wait!" She had no idea what was happening. She couldn't understand the reason for Rusty's bizarre behavior, but she had no doubt that his instincts had detected some terrible secret connected to Professor Finch. "Rusty, sit!" Chloe used all her strength to pull back the leash as he strained to get to the professor. The venue was in an uproar over this unpredictable turn of events. "Hey, what's wrong with that dog? Does it have a grudge against the professor?" Security guards rushed to get between them. Professor Finch's face was beet red, but he tried to maintain his composure, shouting, "What is the meaning of this? That's an undisciplined, dangerous animal. Remove it from the premises immediately." But Rusty wouldn't stop barking. His eyes were fixed on one single point, the leather briefcase at Professor Finch's feet. In that instant, an idea struck Chloe like a bolt of lightning. Rusty isn't tracking the professor himself. He's tracking the briefcase, a faint scent. What scent was it? Waving off the security guards, Chloe slowly approached Professor Finch. "Professor Finch, excuse me, but would you mind if I took a look inside that briefcase?" What nonsense are you talking about? Are you accusing me?" The professor's panic was obvious to everyone. A sheen of sweat covered his forehead. "Rusty never barks without a reason," Chloe said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "He's trying to tell us something. If you have nothing to hide, you should have no problem showing us what's inside." Her calm words made the entire venue focus on the two of them. The superintendent, sensing the gravity of the situation, was now staring at Professor Finch with a stern expression. Cornered, Professor Finch, either in defeat or defiance, unzipped his briefcase. Inside were folders of documents, a laptop, perfectly normal items. "See, there's nothing suspicious in here at all," Professor Finch shouted, as if victory was his. Just then, Rusty broke free from Chloe's grasp and took off with lightning speed. But he didn't run towards the briefcase. Following a faint, almost imperceptible scent trail from the bag, he bolted in a direction no one expected. Chloe scrambled to follow him. Rusty was heading for a storage shed at the far end of the training facility. An area not being used for the test at all. He stopped in front of a pile of old tarps, began digging frantically at the ground, and then let out the loud, clear bark that signaled a discovery. Chloe, out of breath, pulled back the tarp, and there, she saw an unbelievable sight. A young man with a pale face was sitting on the ground. His clothes were soaked with the special scent that the missing person target was supposed to be wearing for the test. He was the final target, who was supposed to be hidden somewhere in the rubble. The entire venue fell silent. Then, an instant later, a tidal wave of gasps and shouts erupted. "What's going on? Why is the target here?" All eyes turned to Professor Finch, who was frozen in place. There was only one possible truth. To ensure that no one could possibly pass his test, and to protect his own authority, Professor Finch had cheated. From the very beginning, he had hidden the missing person target in a place completely unrelated to the course, where he could never be found. But a tiny, trace amount of the target's unique scent had unknowingly transferred to his briefcase. It was a minuscule scent trail that could never be detected by pedigrees or scientific data. But Rusty, and only Rusty, with his extraordinary sense of smell and his desperate desire to help Chloe, had found it. "You're kidding me, the professor, he rigged it?" The police officials were stunned, speechless. It was the moment that everything they believed in, pedigree, data, authority, came crashing down around them. After finding the target, Rusty trotted proudly back to Chloe and nuzzled against her leg. With a trembling hand, Chloe stroked his head again and again. "Thank you, Rusty, you showed us the truth." This was a victory that went far beyond the petty realm of passing or failing a test. It was total, absolute vindication. The mongrel that no one believed in, with nothing but his pure heart and an unbreakable bond, had exposed the fraud of a powerful authority figure. It was, without a doubt, a miracle born from their bond. The scandal of Professor Finch's fraud sent the test site into a vortex of chaos and excitement. The man who had been a symbol of authority stood exposed and stunned in front of everyone. His reputation in tatters, his scientific theories and grand data were powerless against the scent of truth. Detected by a dog with no pedigree. Police headquarters was in turmoil. Professor Finch was completely disgraced, and he was later effectively expelled from his academic associations. The incident also had a decisive impact on Inspector Callahan's fate. As the internal investigation progressed, it was revealed that Callahan had been secretly communicating with Professor Finch, collaborating on the plan to humiliate Rusty. A few days later, Chloe was summoned by the superintendent. When she opened the door to his office, she saw Callahan, looking like a different, broken man. As soon as she entered, he stood up from his chair and bowed his head deeply. "Constable Mitchell, no, Chloe, I am truly sorry." His voice, once so arrogant, was now a weak, trembling whisper. "I refused to believe in your potential. And in Rusty's, I was convinced that my values were the only ones that were right. And I deeply wounded both of you. And my own honor as a police officer. I know I don't deserve forgiveness." Chloe said nothing, just watching him in silence. The hatred was gone. In front of her was not the ice-cold elite, but a weak man, crushed by his own mistakes. It had been decided that Callahan, at his own request, would be transferred to a remote, one-man police post in the countryside the following day. It was, effectively, a punitive demotion. He turned to Chloe one last time and said in a choked voice, "You were right, good luck." With those words, he practically fled the office. After Callahan left, the superintendent turned to Chloe, his face filled with emotion. "It's been a long road, Chloe, but your and Rusty's achievements have been formally recognized by headquarters. I want to personally apologize for all the unfair treatment you've endured. I am truly sorry." There were tears welling in the superintendent's eyes. He handed Chloe a single piece of paper. It was an official notice from the National Police K-9 Association. It read, "To K-9 Rusty and Handler Constable Chloe Mitchell, in recognition of their distinguished service, for demonstrating extraordinary ability and an unbreakable bond that transcends pedigree and precedent, contributing greatly to saving lives and restoring the honor of the police force, we hereby award the Special Commendation for Meritorious Service." It was the first time in the association's history that a mongrel had ever received this prestigious award. Chloe clutched the paper and cried silent tears. The long battle was finally over. The lonely journey that began on a roadside, with a dying little life that had been called a disgrace, had reached its triumphant conclusion. The award ceremony was held a few weeks later in a large hall in Canberra. Amid a sea of flashing cameras, Chloe, with a proud Rusty by her side, walked onto the stage. Bathed in the spotlight, she stood before the microphone. The hall was silent. Everyone was waiting for her words. Chloe slowly began to speak. "The reason I'm standing here today is not because I have superior skills. And it's not because Rusty has a special pedigree." She looked down lovingly at Rusty at her feet. "It's simply because we never, ever gave up on believing in each other. That's all. Rusty taught me that true strength doesn't come from your birth or your background. It comes from the heart to believe in someone. And the heart to never give in, no matter the odds." Her words deeply moved everyone in the hall. Amid thunderous applause, Chloe placed the gold medal around Rusty's neck. Rusty, not understanding what it was, but sensing Chloe's joy, wagged his tail happily. It was the moment a legend was born. The story of a girl and her dog, with no pedigree and no backing, who used their bond as their only weapon to tear down the walls of authority and prejudice. Their legend would go on to light a flame of hope in the hearts of many. Months passed after the award ceremony, and a peaceful routine returned to Chloe and Rusty's lives. They were no longer the station's shame or miracle heroes. but trusted and essential partners at the Hobart Central Police Station, beloved by the local community. Rusty's unique ability to sense emotion was formally recognized. It was now used not only in search and rescue operations for missing persons, but also in a wide range of areas beyond the traditional scope of a police dog, such as protecting children hiding their fear in domestic violence situations, and caring for elderly citizens in despair after being scammed. One sunny spring day, Chloe was invited to be a guest speaker at a local primary school. And of course, Rusty was with her as the guest of honor. The children gathered in the school hall had stars in their eyes, thrilled to see a real police dog. On the stage, Chloe began to tell their story in simple words the children could understand. The day she found Rusty on the side of the road, the difficult training days when no one believed in them, and how they overcame so many obstacles to build their unbreakable bond. The children listened to the story with rapt attention. At the end, during the question and answer session, a little girl timidly raised her hand. Miss Chloe, why is Rusty so special? Is it because he has a good bloodline? The adults in the room held their breath for a moment at the innocent question. Chloe smiled gently, stepped down from the stage, and knelt in front of the little girl. She softly stroked the back of Rusty, who was sitting beside her. What makes Rusty special? It's not because he has a good pedigree, she said, looking the girl in the eyes. It's not just his strength or his bravery that's special. What's truly special is his heart. You see, Rusty was once abandoned and went through something so scary he almost died. But he never gave up. And when he found someone who believed in him, he believed in them right back with all his heart. The ability to never lose hope, no matter how hard life gets. And to believe in others, that's what makes Rusty truly strong and special. And that's a power that every single one of us has inside us. The little girl nodded slowly, then reached out her small hand and gently petted Rusty's head. Rusty closed his eyes, enjoying the touch, and nuzzled his head against her hand. Watching them, Chloe's heart filled with a warm feeling. To know that the story of what they had overcome had planted a small seed of hope in the hearts of the next generation, it made all the hardship worthwhile. That evening, Chloe and Rusty were taking their usual walk along the riverbank. The setting sun painted the distant mountains red, bathing the world in a soft, peaceful light. Chloe sat down on the grassy bank and hugged Rusty tightly. We've come a long way, haven't we, mate? And you brought me here with you. In reply, Rusty quietly rested his head on Chloe's lap. His amber eyes, full of deep trust and love, looked up at her calmly. Throughout their journey, they had saved many lives: the missing old man, the boy lost in the storm, and the justice of the police force, protected by exposing a fraud. But Chloe knew, the very first life that Rusty had saved was none other than her own. The insecure, timid, and powerless rookie police officer named Chloe Mitchell. Rusty had given Chloe the courage to believe, and Chloe had given Rusty the hope to live. They had filled each other's missing pieces and become one complete whole. She didn't know what the future held. There would surely be more challenges ahead, but Chloe was no longer afraid of anything. We'll always be together, she whispered quietly. Bathed in the sunset, a girl and her dog, bound by an unbreakable bond, sat quietly together. The flower of hope that had bloomed in their hearts would never wither. Their legend had only just begun.